Hey, so if you have clicked on this video, chances are that maybe you have always wanted to learn Node.js. And why wouldn't you? It is one of the most popular server-side environment that exists out there. So we at Scala are bringing you a very extensive and a very advanced Node.js course, which will take you from scratch to advanced. I'm Rinal. I'm working as a developer advocate with Scala, and I'll be taking you throughout the course, where we'll understand every what, when, and hows of Node.js. So without any further ado, let's get started. So before diving into Node.js and understanding all the ins and outs of it, we first need to understand JavaScript. We first need to learn the basics of JavaScript, right? Because obviously Node.js is a runtime environment of JavaScript. You can just say that Node.js will actually allow you to run your JavaScript code on your machine, and that is why it is called runtime environment of JavaScript. So Node.js is basically built upon C++, but it supports the language JavaScript. We write our code in JavaScript, all right? So we need to understand the basics of JavaScript first. So any programming language, right? Whenever you're learning any programming language, there are some basic stuff that you need to know, like declaring variables. How can you declare variables in JavaScript? How can we initialize arrays? How can we initialize objects? Right? How can we initialize? How can we create functions? And there is one thing in JavaScript that is known as scoping. So different variables. Basically, there are three type of keywords in JavaScript: let, var, and const. They all have different type of scoping. So we'll understand that also. There are two types of scoping: block scoping and function scoping. Let me write that again. Function scoping. So before diving deep into Node.js, we'll understand the basics of JavaScript and we'll install Node.js first. We'll install Node.js first. We'll see how you can install Node.js. We'll see how you can run your first JavaScript program in your local machine. And we'll also see how does your browser runs JavaScript. Right? How does your browser run JavaScript? So basically there are two environments in which you can actually run your JavaScript code. First one is browser. JavaScript was by default built for browsers only, but then the Node.js came, and now with the help of Node.js, you can actually run your JavaScript code on your local machine as well. Right? So let's just start with the prerequisites that we need, that is the JavaScript basics. So first of all, what we will do, we'll actually go and we'll install Node.js. So we'll see how you can install Node.js for your Windows machine. We'll see how you can install Node.js for your Mac machine and of course Linux machine. So let's just go and let's just try and get started. So before installing Node.js and getting started with Node.js, working with Node.js, let us see that how does browser works with JavaScript, right? So here I am at my browser, right? And I'll just right click here and I'll just say inspect. Right? And here you can see an option that is console. You can just go to console and you can just write anything. Right? This should be JavaScript code, but so there is a method that actually helps you log something. I mean, that actually helps you print something on the console. This area is known as the console. So the method is console.log. So what I will write is console.log. And here you can say anything, right? I will say hello inside a string. And here what I'll do, I'll just press enter. So now you can see hello will get printed over here. Right? And also I can declare any variable. I will say let x equal to 2 and we can just go and we can again console.log the value of x and you will get 2 here, right? So in this way browser will actually help JavaScript to run inside it, right? There are basically the concept of JavaScript engines that is helping doing all this stuff, right? So but do you think that writing code in this console will help us? No. All right. So to write JavaScript code, what we'll be using is we'll be using an IDE. So I'll be using VS Code for that. You can choose any IDE that you prefer. All right, so just let me quickly start with VS Code. So here I've created a folder, node scaler. Inside this will be covering everything. We'll be writing all our code. So what I will do is I will just create a folder here, and I'll just name this folder environment. All right. So the first environment that we'll discuss is the browser. As you saw that we can run JavaScript code inside the browser, but what if we need an ID? What if we need to write code and then link it to the browser, and then we'll see everything working there, right? So first of all, what you need to do is you need to create an HTML file and HTML file. So let me just name this for now as index.html, right? And then what I will do is I'll create a JS file over here. So let me just say demo.js. Now this index.html, if you are not familiar with HTML, I'll just ask you to go through, you will just need an hour or so to get familiar with HTML, right? So I'll not be teaching HTML here because this is a Node course. So I'll just take and I'll just write here the doc type HTML. Right? So this is basically the boilerplate code that we write. Right? So inside this, what we can do is we can link our JavaScript. So just to make you a little familiar with it, HTML, what does HTML does is HTML parses everything in your browser, right? Whatever you will write here, it will go into your browser's page, right? Which you have linked with it. So basically what we'll do here is we'll just take a link tag. Right? We'll just take a script tag. Let's just say script tag. And I'll say script and we'll just close this. And inside this script, I'll just pass my source attribute as demo.js, which is this file, this file. And inside this demo.js, what I'll write, I'll just say console.log as we were doing before. We'll say hello from the browser. So what will happen over here is this index.html basically link this JavaScript file to this specific browser page that is linked to this index.html. So let's just open this with live server. I'll just open this with live server. And you can see this is an empty HTML page because of course we haven't written any element. There is no element that we have written over it, right? But notice something here. We'll just go to inspect, and as we'll open the console tab, you can see there is a message here that is hello from the browser, right? And what is that message? This is the same message that we have passed in the demo.js file. All right. So this is one way of writing JavaScript code, and this was the only way before Node.js for writing JavaScript code, because before Node.js, JavaScript was only made for browser. JavaScript used to work with browsers only. But now what we'll discuss? Now we'll discuss Node.js. So let's just go and let's just start with Node.js and let's just first install it, right? So what we'll do is we'll just go to Chrome and we'll come here and we'll just type Node.js. So whenever you will go to Google and you will type Node.js, this is the first link that you will get, which is basically nodejs.org. I'll pin down this link in the description if you want, right? So you can just go to this link and you will see here that this is the homepage of Node.js. So what you have to do is, whatever is your system specification, if you're on a Mac, if you're on a Windows or anything, there is an option. You will get options here to download them. Or you can just go into a long-term support schedule and you will find in the downloads, right? In the download tab, you can find every version of Node.js that is available for you to download according to your system specification, right? There is Windows installer, there is Mac OS installer, and that's it. So let's just start with, as I'm on a Windows machine right now, so I'll just go and I'll just download this long-term support version, or you can actually install the current version. So current version is basically the latest release of Node.js, so maybe it can have some bugs or something like that. But the long-term support version is always useful for you. So you can just get started with long-term functions. I'll just go and I'll just click on this. So you will see that a file is file has started downloading here. I'll just wait for it to download. And now I can open this. Let me just open this. Okay, so this is the setup wizard of Node.js, right? So the setup wizard will install Node.js on your computer, right? Just giving some messages. You can accept the agreement, then you can do next, then yes, I want to install it here. You don't have to do anything here, right? You just need to click on next button. Then you do not need to install this chocolatey for now. It will just make your file size more bulkier. So what you can do is you can just untick this box and you can just start with Node.js. So we'll say next and you can just say install. So this setup wizard will start installing Node.js on your system. So let's just wait for it a little while. And it's here we go. So we have successfully installed Node.js on our system, right? And now to check that if you have installed Node.js on your system or not, you can just go to your command prompt. So let me just quickly go to my command prompt. And you can just go here and you can type node. So as I have typed node, you can see that welcome to Node.js version 16.15.1, right? And you can also type something here, like if I say console log, or if I say let's just say let x equal to 2, right? Let y equal to 3, and what I'll do is I'll just say console.log x plus y. So it will basically print 5, right? You don't have to worry about this undefined right now. I'll tell you later why this undefined is coming. So just ignore it for now. You can just see that the code is working. We can write our code here. We can do any calculation or stuff like that over here only. So this will basically show you that Node.js is actually installed in a system, right? So of course we cannot write our code here. So what we'll do is we'll just again go back to our IDE. So you can come back to your IDE, and where we were discussing the about the environment. So first environment that we discussed is the browser environment. Now we'll go to Node.js. So I'll just create a new file over here, not a folder, a file, and I'll just say node.js, just for the name, right? Node.js. And inside here I can say console.log hello from Node. And what we'll have to do is we'll have to run this file now in our local machine. Now we are allowed, now Node.js is allowing us to actually run this file on the local machine. First, what was happening? We were only allowed to run JavaScript code over our browser, as you saw. But now, because of Node.js, we are allowed to run this file in our local machine. So let's just start with, we will just go to open an integrated terminal so that we can get the correct path where our file is. And we'll just go here. Let me just clear this. Yeah. And now to run a Node.js file, what command you have to type here is you'll just type node and you will type the file's name. The file's name is also node.js. Let's say node.js. And let's just press enter. So what you can do, so what you'll see is you will see hello from node. So basically now what you're doing is you're running this code on your local machine, and that is what is Node.js is required for. It will actually allow you to interact with your local machine with the help of JavaScript, right? So these are the two environments that allows JavaScript to run. Right? Now let's just see the basics of JavaScript and how we can get started with JavaScript. We'll be using Node only to understand everything. We'll be using Node only to run every program, because going into browser and coming back, that doesn't make any sense. All right, so let's just start. So we have discussed the two environment in which we can run JavaScript, and now what we can do is we can create a new folder here with the name of JS Basics. or JS fundamentals, where we'll discuss all the fundamentals of JavaScript. So first of all, as we have seen, we have seen the first fundamental, the first basic point of JavaScript, that how you can print something on your console, how you can print something from your program, right? So in JS fundamentals, we'll be starting with declaring variables. So first of all, I'll just say this as one, or I'll just say that one underscore variables.js. And now let's start by creating some variables and see what are variables and how you can define variables inside of JavaScript. All right, let's just start. So there are basically three keywords by which you can initialize a variable in JavaScript. Now, what is a variable? Of course, whenever you're writing a program, what do you need? You need to store values. You need to store values for future use. And this is where variables come into picture. So what you can do is you can actually create some variables, like just suppose I'll say this is a variable A, and inside this variable A, what I can do is I can store any value, right? I can store 20. Inside this variable B, I can store hello string, right? There I can say variable C, I can say scalar is awesome. And I can also create one more variable where I can set true or false. Right? So this is how you can create variables inside of JavaScript. But have you noticed one thing here? I am never setting any type for these variables. If you're coming from the languages like Java or C++ or the statically typed language, for example. So these languages, they actually have this compulsion. That you'll have to always define a type for your variable. You'll always have to define a type for your variable. Like in Java, if you are actually initializing an integer value, right? So what you'll have to do is you'll write int a, and then you can initialize the value like that. So you're defining the type of this variable. But here what you can see is I've just wrote var a, var b, var c, var d, and I'm never initializing, or I'm never setting any type over here, right? So I'm talking about this in a very vague manner, but let's just go and write some code and see how is this working, right? So what I'll do is, first of all, I'll discuss the var keyword. So before ES6, before let it cross, there was only one keyword by which you were allowed to declare variables, but there were some problems with var. We'll come to that later. So right now, what can we do is we can just say var a, and we can set this to 2. Right? We can come down, we can say var b, and we can set this to a string. Scalar is awesome. Right? And to print this variable, what we can do is we can just console.log a, and we can console.log b. Right? And let's just go and let's just run this code and see what does this prints. So I'll just say node variables.js. We'll run this code, and you can see it prints 2, and it also prints scalar is awesome. It is printing the variable a, and it is printing the variable b as well. But notice something, we did not define any type for this variable. And this is what is the dynamic nature of JavaScript. Not only this, but what you can also do is that you can reinitialize this variable, you can redeclare this variable, you can reassign these variables, right? So let me just go and let me just do this. I'll say var a equal to, I'll say 30, right? So in other programming languages, this thing isn't allowed. You are not allowed to redeclare a variable, but in JavaScript you are. you can also reassign this variable, right? So first what you have done is you have assigned this a with a number, then you redeclared this a with a number. You can also do this. You can also redeclare this variable with a string, and JavaScript will allow that. JavaScript will allow that. And you can also reassign this variable with a different data type value. Like I just reassigned this with true. This is also allowed, right? So this is basically what is the dynamic nature of JavaScript, right? You can reassign, you can redeclare, you can do anything with your variables that you want. So if I just go into VS Code, if I just go into terminal and run this program again, so now you can see it's printing true as we have reassigned the value of a to true, right? And then it is printing square is awesome because the b variable consists of this value. But in different programming languages, you are not allowed to do this, but in JavaScript you are. So basically, the JavaScript is known as dynamic in nature because of this behavior. Dynamically typed language. We call JavaScript as a dynamically typed language. All right. So this was it. This was the first thing that we needed to discuss. Now, so we basically learned how to declare variables in JavaScript with the var keyword. But there are two more keywords that are let and const. So if we had this var keyword and if there is no need to specify any data type in JavaScript, then why do we need more than one keyword? That is the question, right? So there are a lot of problems with var. There are a lot of problems with var. Like the first problem you can notice here is that you are allowed to redeclare this variable. You're actually redeclaring a, and you can redeclare this multiple times, and you can save any value inside of them. You can save a number string, and you can basically redeclare. You can actually reinitialize. You can reassign the values here with var keyword. But this sometimes becomes a security issue. This is a big security issue because, of course, if you have a large application and you're allowed to redeclare a variable, if by mistake anyone redeclares a variable, the value of that variable will change forever. And that is not something that you want, right? So this was the first problem. So this is the first problem with var, right? So let me just write this problems with var. Problems with the var keyword is that redeclaration is allowed. Redeclaration is allowed, which shouldn't be allowed, right? So to tackle this problem, let keyword comes into picture. We'll see how let will solve this problem. Now, the second problem with var keyword is it is function scoped. Now, what is function scoped? What is block scope? Okay, we'll come to that later. First of all, let's just solve this problem. Right? So here, if you see var a, we have redeclared this so many times, and it is good enough to run our program. It will not throw any error. It will not show anything like that. But if we use the let keyword, let me just say let c equal to, I'll say hello, and I'll just print this over here. I'll just print this let c over here. So it will print hello here, right? But what I cannot do is I cannot do this again. If I say this 30, so you can clearly see that this is actually showing me an error, right? And this error is cannot redeclare block scoped variable, because of course we can redeclare the variable when we are using var keyword, but this problem let is solving by actually not allowing us to redeclare any variable out here, right? So this is a problem let keyword is solving. So if we run this code now, and let me just type console.log c over here also, and let's just comment this code, and I can go and I can run this code now. So I'll just say node. This is the code, right? So I'll just say node variable.js. I'll run this file, and now you can see the terminal has thrown us an error, and it says identifier C has already been declared. Identifier C has already been declared. So you cannot redeclare this variable now. So this is what the difference between, this is the first difference between var and let is, right? Or, but reassigning is allowed with let, right? Reassigning, redeclaration. This is basically redeclaration, because you can see we are actually redeclaring the variable. But if I just do this, this is allowed. This is allowed. Like any other programming language, reassigning is allowed, unless it's a constant variable, right? So here it is. Let C is equal to hello. We are console logging hello, and then we are reassigning this value to 30, and now it is allowed. Now it is allowed. So if we run this code now, if we run this code over here now, so we'll see node variable.js, and you can see hello and 30. All right. So reassigning is allowed. But there is a third keyword. There is a third keyword that is known as the const keyword. That is known as the const keyword. And as the name suggests, const is basically for defining anything as a constant, right? So if I just say const a equal to a, okay, I've commented this out, but still I'll say const d, right? So const d equal to, let me just say, welcome to scalar. So now I will just print this here. And let's just run this code. So you can see hello 30, which is basically coming from this let variables, and then it's coming welcome to scalar from this const. But what you cannot do here is you cannot redeclare this and you cannot reassign this. In let, you were only allowed to reassign, you were not allowed to redeclare. In var, you were allowed to do both. You could also redeclare, right? You could also redeclaring, and reassigning. Both the things were allowed here. But with let keyword, there was only reassigning. You cannot redeclare this, right? So I'll just say reassign. But with const keyword, nothing is allowed. No redeclaration, no reassignment. All right. So what you can do is you can just try this out by doing this const d equal to goodbye, or you can just say const d equal to, we can just reassign this as d equal to 50 or something like that, right? So this is not showing any error. This is not showing any error, but it is not allowed. So let me just quickly show you this. If I go and console log d over here, so what you will see, you'll see an error, right? Let me just run this node one variable.js. Okay, so we are thrown an error. The terminal has thrown us an error, and that says assignment to constant variable. This error will come here because we are actually reassigning a constant variable. A constant variable cannot be redeclared. A constant variable cannot be reassigned. All right. So this is basically about these three keywords of JavaScript. There is var, there is let, and there is const. And we actually discussed their first properties, right? That how do they work. So let me just erase this and let me just create a little table over here. So this is basically var. Okay. This is var, where you are allowed to redeclare and where you're allowed to reassign. You're allowed to do both. Then there is let, where you're only allowed to reassign. Then there is const, where you're only allowed to declare this variable for one time. No reassignment, no redeclaration. All right. So this was the first thing that we need to learn about the variables and the keywords. There are 2 or 3 more differences that we need to see on var, let, and const, but they are for another time. All right. So this is the basic of how you can declare variables, right? So just try and play around with it for a while, declare some variables, print them, right, and do that stuff. And after this, we'll be moving to arrays and checks. So now let us discuss about arrays. That what are arrays, why do we need them, and what purpose do they serve, right? So array is basically a data structure. Array is a data structure that will help you to store multiple values. To store multiple values at once, right? So array is particularly a data structure in which what you can do is you can store multiple values at once. Like let's just see how you can initialize an array, right? So you'll understand that better. So what I'll do is I'll just create a new file here. I'll say to underscore arrays.js. And so here we have created a file, and we'll just close all these files for now. All right. So yep. Let's just see. So first of all, we need to understand how you can initialize an array. So to initialize an array, there's a very simple way in JavaScript. You just need to declare a variable. I'm using let here. So I'll say let arr equal to just square brackets, right? So this is how you can initialize an array. And inside the square brackets, you can put all the values that you want, right? So let's just suppose that so I'll just write it right here, initializing an array. Right? Initializing an array. Now let's just see how you can initialize and how you can put values inside an array. So for example, let's say that we have multiple fruits, right? We have multiple fruits, and we have a task to create an array of those fruits. So what we'll do is we'll just go here. I'll just go here. I'll just type let fruits equal to, and how you can initialize with a square bracket, and inside the square bracket you can basically use single quotes or double quotes, right? There is no compulsion in JavaScript for using single or double quotes for strings. So what you can do is you can just use single quotes. This is basically recommended, and inside the single quotes you can name your fruit. Like suppose I give the name mango here, and then we have apple, right? And then we have orange, and so on. You can add as many as fruits as you want, right? So I'll just do this in a single quote. All right. So in this way, you can actually create an array. Basically, what you're doing is you are storing multiple values at once inside this data structure, right? But there is a catch. There is one important thing about array is that these values will always be indexed. These values will always be indexed. What do I mean by that? Basically, the basic behavior of array is that it will actually give particular indexes to these particular values so that we can refer them at a later stage of time. And the indexing starts from 0. So basically, your first your first array element will start from the index 0. Your second element will basically have the index +1. That means it will have the index 1. And then this orange element, that is the third element, it will basically have the index of 3. So basically, what you can say that the longer your array is, basically the length of your array, right? So you will always have your index from 0 to n-1, where n is your last element, right? For suppose you have 0, 1, sorry, this will be 2. Little mistake, this way 2. So 0, 1, 2. All right. So you have 3 elements, but it's starting from 0 and it's ending at 2. So basically you have 3 elements, but your index is what? n-1, basically 3 minus 1, that is 2, right? So this is how array will work. Simple as that. It will always have indexed, it will always have indexes that will basically help you to refer all your elements one by one, right? So this is how you can initialize an array. So the next thing that we need to see is that how can you access the element of an array. So what can you do is you can just go in and you can just say that you need to access this apple from this array, right? So what you can do is you can just go, you can say that let apple equal to, this is the fruits array. So what you will do is you will just say fruits that means you are referring to this array, that bring me this array, and inside this array what I need is I need the first index. As we have discussed, this will be 0, this will be 1, and this will be 2, right? So we need the first indexed element. We need the first indexes element, the element that is at the first index. So what we can do is we can just pass square array, basically square brackets, and inside the square brackets we can just say 1, right? So what this will bring me is, when I will console log this apple element, let me just say apple element, and when we'll run this code, so now you can see this is actually logging apple, right? So what it has done is it has basically gone to the first index. It has looked at the first index, what value is there, it picked that value, and it has returned it to us. All right, so this is the way you can access element from an array. So I'll just write here accessing element from an array, accessing particular element from an array, right? So this is how basically arrays will work. So there are a lot more things that we need to know about arrays. So let's just go one by one over them. So in JavaScript, now you have noticed here what we have done is we have basically stored same kind of data in this array, right? These three things are all strings, right? Mango, apple, orange, they are all strings. And in other programming language, in statically typed programming language mostly, there is a compulsion. There is a compulsion that an array can only have same kind of data. That means the data type of all the elements should be same. But in JavaScript, this does not stand true, because JavaScript is dynamically typed, as we have seen earlier. So arrays are also dynamic in JavaScript. So what you can do is you can actually store, like if I say let my array, I'm creating another array here. So inside this array, what you can do is you can actually store different values of different data types, right? So let me just say that hello, this is my first value, this is a string. Then I can also say 2 separated by a comma, right? So this will be my second element, basically the first index element. Then you can say true, this is my boolean value, you can also store it here. Then you can also say that we have stored a string, we have stored a number, we have stored a boolean value. Then you can also you can store a string, right? So there is no compulsion. There is totally no compulsion that an array should have same kind of data. There's nothing like it. It can have anything. So if we just console log this array, you'll see that it is perfectly fine and it will print, right? So let's just open Node. Here it is, right? So this is an array in which we have value hello, 2, true, goodbye, like that. So basically this is how array will behave in JavaScript. So when we'll discuss object, I will let you know that how arrays are also objects, right? But as we have not gone into objects that deeply, so I'll not confuse you right now. So what we can do is we can now see that how our different methods can work with arrays. How can you use different method with arrays to add element, to remove element, right? To manipulate your array a little bit. So let's just get started with the methods now. All right, so now let's just see what are the different array methods. What are the different array methods that you can use with JavaScript? Basically, that you can use to manipulate your array, to play around with your array, right? That you can use, array methods that you can use. So the first method that I will be discussing is the push method, right? So, okay, so what you will do if you want to add an element in your array, right? Adding an element in here, basically we're discussing that. So one thing is that you will go and you will statically add an element here, right? Like anything, false or something like that. You'll just add an element here, but not everything will be statically done, right? You'll have to perform some dynamic operations sometimes. So what you will do is you will get a data from somewhere and then you'll have to add that to your array. So you will have to perform something like that, all right? So what you can do is you can use the push method to add a data in your array. So what push method will do is it will actually go to the end of your array and it will add the data there, right? So if you see hello, to, true, and goodbye. So these are the 4 elements that we have in our array. What if we want to add an element after goodbye, right? What if we want to add an element after goodbye? So we can just use a push method. So what we'll do is we'll just use my array because that is the array we want to because that is the array at which we want to add the element, and in this my array we'll just use this push method and we'll just say anything, whatever you want to add, right? So if I say I want to add watermelon, let's just use this fruits array. So this will make sense. So I'll just use this fruits array and I'll add watermelon in it, right? So what will happen is basically this push method, what it will do is it will just take this fruits array and what it will do is it will just push watermelon. It will just push watermelon here after orange, right? So let's just run this code and see that. So note, alright, so we haven't printed this fruit element. What I'll do is I'll just come here and I'll console log that fruit element also, fruit array also. So here you can see that mango, apple, orange, and here we have watermelon also. So what does push method will do? It will actually add an element, adds an element at the end of an array. Right? So this is what push method does. Of course, there is one method that is known as pop method. So as push method was adding an element at the end of an array, what pop method will do is pop method will basically do the opposite. It will remove the element, right? It will remove the element from the end. All right, so what we can do is we can just go here, we can just say fruits dot pop, and that's it. That's it. So fruits dot pop will automatically identify the last element that is inside this array, and now it will remove that element again. So it will remove that element basically. So let's just go and console log the fruits array again and see that this has worked or not. So what will happen is we have basically modified the fruits element with watermelon. So now our array has basically it has mango, orange, apple, and watermelon, right? So what pop method will do is it will just remove the last element, that is the watermelon, right? So let's just see. We'll just go here, we'll just say node, and you can see that this was the modified array when we pushed watermelon inside it and then we were popping it. So pop, what will it do? It will basically remove the last element from the array. So these were the two methods that are used to remove from the last and add to the last, push and pop, right? So now let's just discuss some more methods. All right. So what if we want to add or remove any element from the starting of our array, from the basically starting of an array, right? So here push and pop were from the end of an array, but what we want to do is we want to add or remove element from the starting of our array, right? So for that we also have methods. So the first method is the shift method. Let's discuss unshift first. All right, unshift method. So unshift method, it will actually allow you to add an element at the starting of your array. So how will this method work is basically what we'll do is let's just take this fruits array for example again, and with this array we'll be using our unshift method. And inside this unshift method, you will have to pass what element you want to add. So I'll just pass a banana here, and I'll just go and will print the fruits array again. Right. So let's just go and run this code. I'll say node, and this is my file name. So now you can see that banana has been added at the first index, at the 0th index. So what unshift method has done is it has just taken this value and it has added this value in the first index of an array, that is basically the 0th index, right? So this is how unshift works. And if you want to remove an element from your starting of an array, what you can use is you can use a similar method like push and pop. There is unshift and shift, so you can use the shift method over here. So it will basically help you to remove an element from the starting of an array, right? So this is how they'll work, and let me just write something for this as well. So I'll just say fruits dot shift, right? So as I have write fruits dot shift, and when we'll console log this, what it will do is, you can guess, it will remove banana for you, right? So that's it. So here we'll go and we'll just try open integrated terminal node. So basically now you can see this updated array that banana has been removed from here, and this is because of the shift method. All right, so these are the 4 methods that we discussed: push, pop, unshift, and shift. What push will do is it will add an element at the end. Pop will basically remove an element from the end. Unshift will add an element at the starting of an array, and shift will remove the element from the starting of an array. So these are the 4 methods that we discussed. So let's just go further and discuss some more methods. So this is how basically arrays work, right? So there is a lot more stuff. There is a lot more stuff that you can do with arrays. Like you can also use higher order function. You can use spread operator to glue in an array and all that stuff. But we do not have a better understanding of objects right now. So what we'll do is we'll just go through objects once. We'll understand objects once deeply, and then we'll move on to further, like in further videos we'll move on to different things you can do with arrays, right? So let's just move on to objects now. So what I'll do is I'll just create another file over here, and I'll say 3 underscore objects. So here we'll start with JavaScript objects, right? So let's just start. So in JavaScript, objects are basically a collection of data in key value pair. Yes, it's basically a collection of data for a particular object that will contain its properties in key value pair, right? So for example, let me just create an object over here. I'll say let person, right? Let person, and I'll initialize this as an object. To initialize a variable as an object, what you have to do is you'll just like in array you used to initialize an array with a square bracket. Here we'll just initialize an object with the curly braces, that is the curved brackets here. So this is how you can initialize an object. And now what you can do is you can just add some properties about this person object in key value pair. Like for example, what can a person have? A person can have a name. So we'll just add a name. Suppose we added Adam. All right, then you can separate this property with a comma. You can add another property with another key. Let us say age, and we'll say Adam is 23, right? So this is Adam, and here is his phone number. So we can say anything, right? For example, just I'm writing any random numbers here. So this is how you can actually create an object that will basically store details or properties of this particular object in the form of key value pair, where this name is the key and Adam is the value, age is the key, 23 is the value, phone is the key, and this random number is the value. All right, so in this way JavaScript stores properties, right, for a particular object. Now if you want to access any of these properties, what you can do is there are two notations by which you can actually access any property or any value inside of an object, from inside of an object. So the first thing is the dot notation. Like for example, if you want to access this name property from this object, what you can do is you can just say, I'll just console.log this, and I'll say person, I'll refer to this object dot, I'll get the name out of it. So person dot name. So let me just print an object first, so you'll see how object gets printed. I'll print the whole person object first. So you'll see that this is how it will get printed. So I'll just say node and 3 object.js here. So this is basically an object, right? Where we have name, age, and phone. It's similar to this object, right? This object is basically printed here. Now, to access some particular properties from the object, what you can do is you can use the dot notation. So this is basically the dot notation, where you're actually calling a property by just adding a dot and the key's name, right? So here the object is person and the key basically is the name. So what it will do is it will bring the value out of that key. Person.name has the value Adam. So by this we are expecting to print Adam. Right? So let's just try this. So you can see Adam is getting printed here. This is the object basically. We don't need this console.log anymore. Right? So this is here Adam is getting printed. Right? So this is the dot notation, and there is one more notation, that is the bracket notation, by which you can access any property of an object. So let's just quickly see that also. Bracket notation. So what we'll do is we'll just console log. We'll again call the person object, and inside bracket, inside square bracket, in under string, right? Under string, what we'll pass? We'll pass the name of the, will pass basically the key's name, right? So here the key's name is name, age, phone. You can pass anything, but it should be inside a string. So here will pass phone, suppose, like that, and so it will basically bring out the phone key and the particular value of the key, right? So let's just run this again and we'll see what happens. So node. So you can see that this brings out the number value, basically the phone value, right? So this is how object work in JavaScript. This is how you can create an object in JavaScript. But not only this, object has so many different properties, right? So let's just see objects in a little more detail, and can see what else we can do with object in JavaScript, right? So let's go ahead. So let me just take an example of I'll create an object, right? And I'll say this is Captain. I hope you guys are familiar with Captain America, right? So I'll just create an object of Captain America where I will be defining all the properties related to him, right? So what I will do is I'll just create let Captain, let Captain America. So this is basically the object. So what all properties can Captain America have, right? So here he can have his first name. So I'll just say first name, and I will initialize this first name. I'll give it a value of Steve. Then there can be last name. So I'll just give this a value of Rogers. Steve Rogers. This is his first name. This is his last name. All right. Very nice. Now see. Here I want to show you that inside an object, inside the keys of an object, you can set any value that you want. You can set any value that you want, right? So not only string or not only numbers, you can set any value that you want. Like if I go and I say is Avenger, and if I set this true, that's also perfectly valid inside of an object. So you can set string in the keys, you can set boolean in the keys, and of course let me just say Captain America has friends, right? So you can also initialize an array inside an object so that you can have multiple values here. Like he had a lot more. He had many teammates. He had multiple teammates, right? So what I can say is I can just say Thor. I can say Tony Stark. can say Bucky Barnes and so on. You understand the drill. So now you can also store arrays inside of keys. Then you can also, sorry, not a semicolon, a comma. So friends, we can store array. We can basically store Boolean values. We can basically store strings, and let me just store his age. So we can actually store numbers, right? We can do all those stuff like that. We can also store nested objects inside an object. So let me just go and grab something as address. I have initialized a key named as address, and this address will basically have multiple properties, right? Address has multiple properties, state, city, pin code, etc., and all that. So we can also make a nested object inside of an object. So how can we do that? We can just do that by doing this, that we created an address, and we can say that this is an object, and inside this object we have multiple values, like we have state, not this dot state key, and in this state key we have New York, and for the city we can type Manhattan, or Brooklyn. I don't know, I mean, I'm just writing all this randomly just to make you understand, right? So state New York, city Brooklyn. So you can just write your properties like that inside of an object. So you can string Boolean, basically you can initialize an array, you can put a number, you can put a nested object. You can also create functions. You can also create function inside of an object. But I'll tell you about functions when we'll get to the functions. As we have not discussed functions, I'll not be discussing functions over here. All right. So this is how you can create an object, right? So now what we can do is, how can we access these values? How can we access these values? So there are two notations that we first discussed. One is the dot notation. The second one is the bracket notation. So what I'll be doing is I'll be using dot notation over here to access some values. Like if I want to access friends, if I want to access this friends array, what I can do is I can just say console.log, and I can go to the Captain America object, inside of which I need friends, and so this will give me the whole array. But what if I need some specific element from this array, like I need Tony Stark, for example? So here the array fundamentals will follow, the array property will follow, like the array is always indexed. So if this is 0th index, this will be my first index. So what I can do is I can just go to friends, I can just say bring me the first index, right? And if you run this now, so you will see that Tony Stark is getting printed here. That is basically the first index of this array, right? So this is how you can basically initialize object. This is how you can basically set the key value pairs. And these are all the things that you can put inside a key of an object, right? You can also put functions, but we'll get to that later. And now you can print all this values, and you can play around with all these keys, right? So this is basically a basic structure of how an object is created inside of JavaScript, right? So there are different things that we can do here. That means we can say you can access, you can also access this address nested object here, right? So this is the basic structure of object inside JavaScript. So now if you want to add something to this object, you can also do that. If you want to remove something from this object, you can also do that. We have all the means for that as well. So if you want to add something in this object, so what we can do is we can just refer to this object, and if you want to add a new property, like there is no movies property here, so what I will say is Captain America.movies, and I will make this as an array, and I'll just add some movies, like I will add Age of Ultron, or let's just add Civil War or something, and let me just add one more, Endgame, right? So you can see I've added 3 movies here. So now if I will print this object, now if I will print this whole object, that is the Captain America object, so now you will see that a movies key will be added to this whole object, and you will also see these values there, right? Let me just run this again. So I'll just say node And now you can see this, that in the end a movies property has been added with these values that we just pushed here, right? So this is how basically you can actually also add something to your object. Now there is a thing by which you can also delete something from your object. So there is a delete keyword that you can use, and you can just pass the object and you can pass the key. Like suppose I want to delete the age, so I'll just write delete and I'll say from which object and what property I need to delete, and I can just say this, and this will basically delete this property from my object. So now if I console log my object, so you will see that that particular age property, you can see here is age property, but whenever I'll console this, it will not be there. Right? So let me just go back and run this code. So now I can see now my object does not have the age property. It has been deleted. So this is how you can basically add your property. You can delete your property. If you want to update your property, like if you want to update is Avenger, so you can just take this property and you can set it to something else. Like if I go there, if I go here and I say Captain America dot is Avenger, right? And I set it to false, that no, he is not an Avenger. So what will happen is that this will set it to false. So now whenever you look at this object, you will see that the value will be set to false. So if I run this code, sorry, I misspelled this, false. Alright. So now you can see that is Avenger is actually false now. So this is how you can actually update your object. You can add something to your object, you can delete something from your object. So this is the basic idea of object in JavaScript. We'll be doing a lot more stuff with objects further, but to start with objects, I think this much is enough for now. So yeah, so we have discussed variables, we have discussed arrays, we have discussed objects. Now the last thing that we want to discuss in this video is the functions. In JavaScript, how functions will work, what is the purpose of functions, how to initialize, how to create, how to declare, what are parameters, what are arguments. All that thing will be seen next, right? So I'll just create a file over here and I'll say for_functions.js. So in this file basically we'll be creating functions and we'll be learning all about functions. So let's get started with functions now. Okay, so now let us discuss functions, right? What are functions? So let me just go to the board and just let you know what are functions. So basically, if we define functions, so functions are just a piece of code. Functions are just piece of code that runs when you call it, right? So it can also take inputs, and according to those inputs, whatever instruction that you have passed inside that function, it will take these inputs, it will process these inputs according to that particular instruction that you have passed, right? That what you have to do with this input, and it will give you a specific output that is basically required out of it, right? So this is basically what a function is. It is a piece of code that will execute when you need to call it, right? You just write it and after some time you can call it, so it will actually do the task for you. Okay, so for example, let's just go to our IDE, and here I have created a file for function.js, and here I'll be writing a normal function, right? So first of all, let me just write how will you declare a function, right? How will you declare or define a function? So what you do is you need to add this function keyword. You need to add this function keyword to declare or define your function. So here I will say function and I'll say greet, right? Function greet, double brackets, and I'll open this. So this is your function body. This is basically your function body. You have defined the function and now this is your function body. Here you can actually define your function, that what your function will do, right? So it will basically do, it will console log hello from scalar. So this is the task of this function, and as I said, this is a particular piece of code which you can call at any stage of a program wherever you want, right? So I'll just call it here only. And how you can call it? You will just have to name this function, right? You just have to name this function, and I mean, you just have to take the name of this function and you have to add these brackets, right? So this is known as function call or function invocation. Right. So what it will do is whenever you will call it, it will actually refer to this greet function, and whatever is basically the task of this function, this will happen then. Right. So let me just quickly run this for you. So I will come here. Okay, I have opened a lot of files. I'll just close everything. All right, and I'll just come here. I'll say function and I'll say node 4. So this is how, and here you can see hello from scaler, which is basically the task of this particular function, right? So this is how, what you can do is, this is how you can create function, and this is how you can call your function. So this is known as function creation, function declaration, function definition, whatever you can say. And this is basically the function invocation, right? Function invocation, and this is your function call, or you can call it a function call, right? But this function can also take in inputs. This function can also take in inputs. So what we can do is, let's just create a simple function for adding two numbers, right? So what I will do is, I'll just say function and I'll name this function as add. And here what I will do is, I'll pass a comma b. I'll pass a comma b. So this a and comma b, these are basically the expected input values that will pass when we will be calling this function, right? So at this stage of time, this a and b, these things, this is known as parameter of a function. Parameter of a function. Basically parameters of a function, right? A and b are the parameters of a function. Basically what is expected out of this function, that what it is expecting from you are the parameters. So it is basically expecting two values to be passed, and by getting these two values, what it will do is, it will basically add these two numbers. This will add a plus b, right? So let's just call this function, and now when we are calling this function, we have to pass the values that will go into a and b, right? So let's just say I am passing 2 and 3. So now when I'm passing these values, I'm passing these as arguments. These are known as arguments for these parameters, right? Whenever you are defining a function, you're actually expecting some parameters, and whenever you're calling it, you're passing the arguments for that parameters, right? So whenever you will call it, let me just comment this one out, and let's just focus on this body over here. So this body will take 2 and 3 as values, and will call this function. It will add these two values and will produce the output. So what it will give you, if I run this code, so it will give you 5, of course, right? So this is how you can actually create your function. This is how you can actually pass the parameters. This is how you can pass your arguments, right? So this is how a basic function works. So what I need you to do is, you just write the functions of subtraction, multiplication and division, and let's just get done with it, right? So I hope you would be able to do that. I'm not doing it. You can easily do that. You just need to change this names, and you just need to change the operator here, right? So you can do that. So this is how basically a basic function works. But in JavaScript, functions also works as variables. So how will a function work as a variable, right? So that is basically the first class citizen concept of function. That is basically the function expression concept, right? So what we can do is, we can also write a function like this. We can actually include a function inside a variable. Let me just say that we have created a function add here. So let me just create a function sub here. Like, I'll just create a variable named sub, and what I'll do is, I will create a function inside of it, and I'll say that it also takes 2 parameters, and it will also print the result of their subtraction, right? C minus b. So now what you can do is, you can basically use this sub as a function, because now this variable has this whole function inside of it, right? And this concept is basically known as functions as first class citizens, or this is also known as the function expression, because what you're doing is you're actually including a function inside of a variable, and this is perfectly valid in JavaScript. You can do this. So now if you call this sub, with 3 and suppose 1, so what will be the output? It will be their subtraction, right? That will give you 2. So let's just see. Not 3, the fourth one. B is not defined. Where, okay, sorry, this is D. So you can see it's also giving the output as 2, right? So this is known as a function expression. Right? And this is how you write a normal function. That means a regular function. Right? So this is how you can actually do this kind of stuff. So there is one more concept that I need you to tell this, that is known as, so basically you must be thinking that what is the difference between this and this. Basically both are serving the same purposes. But when we'll go deep into the topics like hoisting and stuff, then you will understand that how our function expressions are different from regular function and what purpose are they solving. Basically, using this function expression are more recommended. It is recommended to use functions as expressions. And why is that? It is because of hoisting. So when we'll get deep into hoisting, we'll actually understand that why writing functions as expression is better than writing regular function, right? So this is how you can actually, these are the two ways in which you can actually create function, right? There is another type of function that is known as arrow functions, but we'll get into that a little later. So the next thing that I wanted to tell you is about the IPI. So IPI is basically immediately invoked function expression. Right? Immediately invoke function expression. Like here you can see that we have defined a function here and then we have called it at a later stage of time. We have defined a function here and then we have called it at a later stage of time. But what is basically IPI? That you basically define a function right there and that is called right there. Alright, it will be immediately called. You will not have to call, you will not be allowed to call it at a later stage of time. You will be needed to write that function over there and it will call that function over there only and it will finish doing its work, right? You cannot call it at a later stage of time. So that is basically an IPI, which basically immediately invoked. It is immediately invoked, right? By the name it's clear. So how can you create an IPI? How can you create an IPI? So let's just create an IPI for multiplying. So I'll just say multiply. And you have to add this round bracket first. You have to add this round bracket first. Inside this, you'll need to initialize your function. You'll need to pass your parameters, that what are you expecting out of it. And then you can normally define the function over here. So I'll just say console log and I'll say that multiply these two numbers, whatever will pass. But now you cannot call this like this. You cannot call this like this, right? This will throw an error. What you have to do is you have to pass your arguments over here. You have to pass your arguments over here. Like you have to pass this argument in the bracket outside, right? 20 and 30, suppose I've passed this, or I just passed 2 or 3, right? So whenever I'll pass 2 or 3 over here, what it will do is it will take this 2 and 3 as an argument and it will pass into this parameter. It will call this function and basically it will print A into B, right? So let's just go and let's just run this. So what I'll say is node 4, and here you can see that you have got the output as 6. That is basically 2 into 6. So these are all the ways in JavaScript that you can create functions. First one is the regular function, how you can create this. Second one is function expression, by basically including a function inside of a variable. And then third is the IPI. So IPI has some limited applications. We'll discuss about them, that where this comes pretty handy, right? Alright, so these are the things. And then there is a type of function. There is a new type of function that is introduced in ES6, that is the arrow function. So we'll be discussing over that as well. But To start with JavaScript, we have discussed today about variables, we have discussed about arrays, we have discussed about objects, and we have discussed about functions. So this much knowledge of JavaScript is enough so that we can start with node fundamentals. You know, we can actually go a little advanced in all those topics. And yeah, so this was pretty much it about this video. And I'll see you on the next video with some more advanced concepts, with some more topics, and we'll discuss it from there. Do subscribe to our channel, and if you like the video, please give us a like, subscribe to our channel. We'll see you on the next video. Thank you so much.